New Lifers, welcome to week 3 of life groups and week 2 of the fitness series. Some of you know Jerry and Rita Laver. Recently, Jerry had some medical struggles, and Rita told me that when Jerry was finally out of the woods, he had a completely new way of talking about the world. And reflecting on the whole situation, Rita said this: "There is nothing more valuable than time." And Rita's right. We value time more than anything else because as long as we're in this world, we are constrained by time. It's really the most valuable thing we have. I heard Andy Stanley point out that at the end of our lives, we are all going to spend a ridiculous amount of time to buy just a little bit of time, to prolong our lives just a little bit longer. When your loved one is on his deathbed or her deathbed, you will spare no expense to keep them alive and comfortable. And then you'll see a bill at the end of it, and you'll realize that you spent a lifetime of money to buy just a little bit of time. And of course we do that, because there's nothing more valuable to us than time, right? The crazy thing is that now, as in before we get older, it's much cheaper to add time to our lives than it will be in the future. Today, we can take simple steps to add time to our lives later, to improve our health. But so many of us avoid these steps because they're just a little too inconvenient, because we don't like to delay gratification. Did you know Moses wrote about time? And he didn't just write about time in the book of Genesis and Exodus like you'd expect from Moses. Moses, the great leader of Israel, wrote a psalm about time. And we can trust what Moses said because Jesus quoted him. So that gives Moses some credence. The Psalms that Moses wrote are the oldest Psalms in existence. In fact, Moses wrote these songs between 1200 and 1300 BC. So I'll do the math for you. That's over 3,300 years ago. And in his psalm, he said, "Lord, through all the generations, you have been our home." So why is Moses talking about home? Remember that at this time, Israel is wandering in the wilderness. They are longing for the promised land, their promised home. And somehow Moses finds comfort in the fact that the promised land isn't actually their home. God is their home, he says. And why is this important? It's important because this is a context statement. Unless you know the context of something or someone, you can't understand its purpose. So, let me give you an example. What is the context of this cord? This is an old version of the iPhone cord. Do you know what that means to me? It's worthless. It's trash. Let's do another one. What's the context of this cord? This is the newest version of the iPhone cord. So what does that mean to me? I will guard this cord with my life because I spend way too much time trying to get my hands on these cords. They have value because of their context. That's true about us too, not just cords, not just stuff. We have value because of our context. And our context is members of the family of God. God is our home. You have value because you are a child of God. Let's move on. Verse 2. Before the mountains were born, before you gave birth to the earth and to the world, from beginning to end, you are God. In other words, Moses is saying, you have no creator, no beginning. You have always been. And in Moses' time, this was a revolutionary concept. Today, there are other religions that kind of claim to worship a monotheistic, uncreated God, but they didn't come around until much later. After Moses wrote this, it took many centuries before anyone else caught up to this idea of a single God. So why is Moses saying this? He's telling us that God's eternal existence is the context of our little tiny lives. Our little short lives are so small compared to the giant context of God. Verse 3, you turn people back to dust, saying, "Return to dust, you mortals," says Morgan Freeman. God. Verse 4, for you 1,000 years are as a passing day, as brief as a few night hours. You sweep people away like dreams that disappear. They are like grass that spring up in the mountains. In the morning it blooms and flourishes, but by evening it is dry and withered. Moses is saying life is so short. So what's the point? What's the purpose? Well, there is no purpose without context. The iPhone 4 cord is worthless to me, and you are worthless unless there is a purpose in your context. Knowing our context, our purpose, helps us to prioritize our time correctly. And it can help us to do hard things now when we really just want to take it easy. If we don't know our context, we waste a lot of time doing things that don't really make a difference in the long run. But when we know our context, we schedule time for those things that we can uniquely do because of who we are, because of how God created us. So stop here and answer the first 3 questions and then push play. Continuing Moses' psalm in verse 10, he says, 70 years are given to us. Some may live to 80. But even the best years are filled with pain and trouble. Soon they disappear and we fly away. Moses is describing a life with no purpose, a life outside of God's eternal context. Then in this psalm, Moses takes a turn and talks about something that many people think is really strange about God and how we talk about God. He starts to talk about fearing God. He's about to say, if you only knew, if you could just comprehend how big God is, you would reprioritize your life completely. So verse 11 says, who can comprehend the power of your anger? Your wrath is as awesome as the fear you deserve. Have you ever wondered why the Bible tells us to fear God? Moses is saying that if you could see how great God is, you could give him the reverence he deserves. In fact, every time someone sees God or one of his angels in Scripture, what was their response? They were terrified. It's the reason the first word out of the mouth of the angels every time they appeared to someone is, do not be afraid. And that great God, his creation of you is the context of your life. Have you ever met a famous person? Did you get all weird and couldn't think of something smart to say, so you said something stupid and walked away and just said, stupid, stupid, why did I say that? Was stupid. Imagine if you met God. You would be petrified. This is why when people say God appeared to me, I'm like, no, he didn't. Your face is not melted off. God did not appear to you. And his greatness is the context of our time. We have limited time on this earth. So what are we doing with it? Apart from God, you are an old iPhone cord. Apart from his greatness, you have no real purpose. Can I say that again? Apart from God, you have no real purpose. Are you becoming who you were meant to be? Verse 12 says, teach us to realize the brevity of life so that we may grow in wisdom. Stop here to answer the last 2 questions, and I'll see you Sunday in church.